All right. So, hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Durr. I am the branch manager at the Watson Branch Library. And if you have ever seen me, any videos of me, or if you've ever seen me in person, you probably know that I love fangirling about books. You've probably seen this from me before. And I'm specifically a huge fan of YA fiction. So today I am so excited to share with you guys not only an up and coming YA author, but an actual local author from Louisiana. He is the author of the Blackstone Ritual, Swearingen Durham.
Hi, everyone. This is
Um,
this is my little book. My
yes,
little
I have a copy too, so I'm just gonna be like,
oh,
showing it
nice.
around. Okay, so I'm so excited, as you can probably tell. But I just want to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and let you introduce the Blackstone Ritual, and then we can talk about it for a little while.
Yeah, of course. So, my name is Swearingen Durham. Hi, nice to meet all of you. You can everyone calls me Swear for short, just because it's a little bit easier. Call me whatever you want. The Blackstone Ritual is the first in a fantasy series called Tales of the Bardenwood, and it centers around this young boy, a 17-year-old stable boy, and he discovers on his 17th birthday that he is actually a super-powered guardian for this mystical king, that in this world that has never been known to him. It's just kind of this hidden magical world right outside his door, and it's his journey to discover what that means and what it means to be that guardian. And he goes through a lot of turmoil and trauma and everything else. So
As they do in YA fiction,
exactly. What YA main character is complete without a little bit of trauma?
Exactly. And honestly, it's why we like it. And, we keep going towards it. Like, I want to be wrecked while I'm enjoying the
Exactly.
book. I get it.
Exactly.
Okay. So I am a huge advocate of YA fiction and specifically YA fantasy. I talk about it all the time. I recommend it all the time as a librarian. And honestly, it's what got me started as a librarian and started like on this whole journey. So I wanted to know what's inspired you to write YA fantasy, and then also what called you to write the Tales of the Bardenwood.
Okay. For me, what called me to write YA fantasy was, I think I can probably, you could probably agree with me, is that it was the books I read when reading wasn't so much of a chore. Like
Right.
when I was a kid and reading was fun and exciting, and I was reading more than I was doing classwork in school.
Been there.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, writing YA fantasy, that was the genre that I had read growing up. Ranger's Apprentice, Spiderwick, Chronicles, all of those major fantasy books. Even though some of those are technically middle grade.
It's a
Aragon,
fine line. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like Aragon was one of the bigger ones that I loved as a kid. So YA fantasy was just natural for me to want to write. And when it came to Tales of the Bardenwood, I really, really wanted to step into those shoes of the younger me,
Mm-hmm.
the one that, liked all of those things. So the Blackstone Ritual is filled with everything. It's filled with creature features and witches and magical forbidden woods and
All the things I love.
exactly, like provincial towns, evil queens. Like I wanted to throw everything that I possibly could without it being out of the ordinary or just out of context, into this story. And there was no better way to do that than to go with Tales of the Bardenwood and just kind of send art on this journey that is wrought from journeys that I've read, all my life. So the first one, the Blackstone Ritual, most certainly is written like an adventure. It's written very, I don't know, I wanted it to read very sing-songy, very old-timey tale, like a bedtime story almost. I wanted it to read like that and to be perceived as that. So I think I did a pretty okay job.
I think you did a good job. From the very beginning, it was super action packed, and you were just kind of like brought into it, and it did feel like a good fantasy of like it brought me back to like reading as you were young and you were just like really experiencing, like I
Yeah.
feel that whole thing. So I think
That's
it's
what I wanted to do. It's
yes,
very, it's a bit, um,
nostalgic, I think.
yeah, I
Yeah,
really wanted
in
it to
its
feel
fantasy.
like that, you know,
Mhm.
in the future, sequels and everything. I do, it's more commercially
Right.
YA and everything. But in the first one, I just really wanted it to feel nostalgic. I just really wanted to kind of remind people what it was like to see a young character just kind of go through the motions and go through everything. And
Deal with all of the things happening to them. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's really where the inspiration for the Blackstone Ritual lies, is in
Gotcha.
that uh, attitude.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's many people out there, me included, who have grand intentions of writing a novel, but the whole process is super just daunting.
Mhm.
So for you, what was the process of beginning the novel? And do you have any tips for those who are thinking about just beginning to write, just in
Sure.
general?
Um, for me, I totally agree with you. The world of publishing and writing is very, there's almost this kind of veil over it. Like you don't really know what to do. I didn't know what to do. All I knew is that this actually all started in 2016
Mhm.
when the flood happened in
Yeah.
Louisiana.
Hmm.
Um, and I hate to bring up any, bad memories for anybody, but for
I mean, we
me,
talk about the flood like we talk about, pretty much anything. It's just
yeah,
now so ingrained in our life.
it
So,
is.
yeah.
And it's such a big deal for the community and
Mhm.
everything. So during that time, luckily, my home was not affected, but I was landlocked, so I couldn't
Mhm.
go anywhere or leave or anything. So I was stuck at home, and for like 3 days, this idea happened, and I plotted almost the entire thing,
Wow.
um, at least like the bones of it. And
Mhm.
for 3 days, it just came up. So once I had that idea, I was like, well, I can't just let this
It's
sit
too good
here.
to let
It's
go.
too it's too good. Or at least it's encompassed enraptured too much of my brain to let go
Mhm.
of. So I started looking into how I could get published and what that looked like. But the internet is full of all kinds of um, misinformation and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So um, there was a Facebook group that I joined that was called Pitch to Publish, and they're actually in my acknowledgments because the woman who runs the Facebook group is absolutely astounding. She just kind of like the entire basis of her Facebook group is to kind of unveil publishing and tell you
Right.
what it's like, and um, uh, it really, really helped me. And once I was able to do that, I had this polished manuscript that was read by beta readers and peer edited by my critique partners, and just kind of it was there. So I started pitching it to agents and
Mhm.
everything, and eventually found my small press publisher,
Mhm.
which is based in Colorado, and it was just kind of went from there. But the advice I can give to any writers who are wanting to publish their work is to make sure that they have a manuscript. One,
Right. The main
you
thing is write the book.
exactly write the book first,
Mhm.
because you can't just have an idea. No one's
Right.
taking an idea and being like, oh yeah, we want that. Like, no,
Mhm.
you have to finish your book, get
Right.
it polished, make sure that it's edited. I mean, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but it should be enough to where you know
Catch
you
its
you would want to
attention.
present it to somebody,
Right.
basically
Right.
nice enough to where you would want to say, I did this, what do you think?
Right.
And then start pitching to agents and everything, and that's a whole conversation we could have. But
Oh my goodness. So, but
yeah,
that's the first step. As an agent, they would get
yeah,
you to a publisher, pretty much.
pretty for traditional publishing. Now
Right. Right.
you like there
Self-publishing is a whole.
exactly self-publishing. Whew, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and
Right.
I consistently talk about how much self-published authors astound me. I think they're the most hardworking
Because they
individuals.
have to do it all.
They have to do it
Yeah.
all. They
Mm-hmm.
have to foot the bill. They have to do marketing. I mean, it's a full-time job, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm in awe of
Mm-hmm.
self-published authors. I think they're absolutely amazing. But for me, no way. There was no way I would ever be able to do it. I had to go the traditional publishing route. So I pitched to agents and stuff like that. And eventually I found I didn't actually get an agent. I found a small press publisher that was
Okay,
in.
gotcha. And then
So some small press publishers, if they're not under the Big Five umbrella, will take submissions that are unagented, and they kind of
gotcha.
found me and through a Twitter pitch contest, and they were like, "We're interested," and then I sent them a piece, and then another piece, and another piece, and then they're like, "Okay, we love it. We want to publish it," and I was
Gotcha.
like, "Okay," and then yeah,
Gotcha.
it was a very long process, but that was pretty much it.
Okay. So, but also beforehand, during the writing part, do you think you having a community of writers and like peer editors and like people who are kind of championing you, is that a big thing?
Yes,
Do you think that's like
definitely.
really helped you finish and
Oh yes,
okay,
you have to. I mean, there's no one person is making anything like entertainment. Like there's no one person making a movie. There's no one
right,
person making a TV show. There's no one person writing a book. And it does come from one person, like the idea, but it takes a team, and it takes I mean, there are dozens of people that touch even my book before it gets out into
right,
the
right.
world.
Yeah, you
So
could just look at, author's acknowledgement page, like you mentioned earlier,
mhm,
and just see all of the people that influenced them and influenced the book. Yeah.
absolutely, and that helped along the way. That made it possible for it to happen. So that community, that neighborhood vibe that you need, I absolutely recommend it. Find someone who is also writing, and that's called a critique partner. I
Mhm.
highly recommend critique partners, which are just people that you basically just share your work with and then talk mess about it and just kind of
Right.
say,
And it
this is
definitely
weird.
it definitely has to be somebody that you trust too, because you don't
Sure.
want because there could you could find somebody who's like, oh, this is great, but doesn't give you constructive criticism. Like you
Yeah.
need to really
Need someone who's gonna tell you the tough things in a nice way.
right. We know
Not
what you mean.
not to be cruel or anything, but you
Right.
definitely want someone who's gonna go, this reads weird. This jolted me out of this, or I don't know if there's a plot hole here. You need someone who's gonna tell you those things, and it's great because a lot of times critique partners are free in the sense that you don't have to pay them money. You just critique their work as well. So
So it's like
you
a bar. Yeah. Just yeah.
yeah, it's just I highly recommend it, and get a group of beta readers. Um, some beta readers you can like purchase, but I find that to be a bit um, problematic in a lot of senses. But for me, my group of beta readers were people that were friends of friends or acquaintances or loose acquaintances that were interested in reading it, and would give me their opinion on it, because a beta reader is not looking for editing, plot holes, things like that. They're not looking
Right.
for.
They're just
They're
looking
looking to see
straight.
if the book is enjoyable. They're looking to
Gotcha.
tell me what they thought about it. So basically, it's just like a group of people that just watch the movie before the movie is, out in the
Right.
world, and just to kind of give you their budding opinions on it in case you need to change something. So yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
definitely
So
recommend.
yeah. So for those wondering, you need your community and you
Yes, you
need
do.
to write the book. This is
Yeah.
for me too, because I have lots of ideas, but I don't have any books written. So thanks
You
for this.
gotta write it. You gotta write it. Just do it.
Yeah. So was the Blackstone Ritual, was that your first book that you've ever written?
It wasn't my first story,
Gotcha.
but it was my first seriously pursued novel. Yeah.
Novel, right. Because
Yes.
I
Like
know
I have
there's
written many stories and many ideas, and the Blackstone Ritual started the same way all of them did. I think the Blackstone Ritual for me was just the first one that I finished, like stuck with, and I'm like, this has an ending. This has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
it's a story. We did
It's a
it. Yeah.
story. I have to write it. So I think the other ones were just kind of like, I think I don't know if you've ever heard of pantsers versus plotters. Um,
Mm-mm.
they're the type of they're like the two archetypal writers you can be.
Okay.
Basically, a pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants and has,
Get it. Okay.
didn't plot anything out. I'm a plotter now, but I think back then I was pantsing
Right.
and just writing it because it felt good, and then I would lose steam, and then there
Mhm.
wasn't any conclusion, and I was like, oh god, and then it just hit the bin. But this one was the first one that I plotted out from start to finish, and then wrote it, and now I'm a plotter through and through.
Gotcha. Good to know. Yeah, because I feel like you hear a lot of times of even like big big name authors, and they're finally publishing their very first manuscript that they wrote. And so I hear a lot of times that you don't ever, or you hardly ever publish your first thing that you've written. It takes a little while to get there.
Yeah, so it definitely does. And a lot of those very big authors, especially in the YA community, they have written a lot. And for them to land big 5 publishers, which is a huge, huge deal.
Right.
I can imagine that being completely true, that they had to write many books before they got there. I was very fortunate and very lucky. I only queried the Blackstone Ritual for about a year before finding my publisher. And it was a great first experience with publishing. They were since they're a small press publisher, they're very willing to work with me in my vision for the book and everything. And it was just a great experience that I think very few authors get to have. So
right. That's good to hear, because you hear so many, terrible horror stories and you mentioned the query letter and, sending that out. So you said you did it for a year. About how many times how many rejections did you get until you got an acceptance?
There were many, many rejections, but that comes with the territory. The more you query, the more rejections you will get.
Right.
So I think the Blackstone Ritual has a little bit over 50 rejections.
Wow.
Under its belt, which is actually pretty common. It's not really a high or low number. Some books get picked up right away. Some books, some of the biggest books have hundreds of rejections, under their belt. And I think it just all depends on who you pitch to, when you pitch to them, and where they're at when you pitch them.
Exactly.
Because some agents love the idea for your story and want to take it on, but already have too many clients or whatever it is. I mean, these are human beings too. So, it's just this it's just the whole point of querying is to just fire until you land one that you agree with and that you vibe with. It's just kind of shooting until you hit where you go. So
all of the circumstances need to line up.
Right. Yeah. And it's a long process, because some agents you might pitch and they may love it, and they may ask for your first three chapters, and then they may reject after that, or then they may ask for your half manuscript or a full request for a full manuscript, and they read that and then they reject. There are so many factors that play into that. So it's just about doing whatever you can. Because when I got my publishing contract for the Blackstone Ritual, or when I got the full request for the whole manuscript from my publisher, my manuscript was out to other agents at the time. So, it was all over the place, waiting. And I got more, while I was having my publishing contract done, I was getting rejections for it. So, wow. It's just part of the process, really. It sucks, but it is something that every writer goes through. So there is that kind of shared experience, that kind of shared lived experience of every writer. So as long as you have that community at your back, and maybe have a Twitter account.
And social media can play a huge part.
Absolutely.
Not only getting the getting a contract or anything, but also once the book is out and having a following and having fans and connecting with it. So that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, especially that kind of outreach is always important for anything that you're trying to do.
Right.
I wrote a book. I want people to read it.
Right. Exactly. And then if you're a crazy fangirl like I am, then you're gonna get into the fandom, and you're gonna find the fan accounts with fan art and all kinds of stuff. So so it's all
same.
Okay, good. Well, it's good to hear that you had a relatively easy, positive publishing experience, because I've heard a lot of horror stories.
Yes,
so that's good. That's good to hear that it's actually, and it's good to hear that traditional publishing with hardback books is still, happening with the, age of e-readers and everything, online. So that's also good to hear, especially as a librarian, we have.
Right. Yeah. Especially.
So it's good. And as a reader, I just like to hold a book in my hand and sniff it and touch it and have it on my bookshelf. So I get it. It's good to hear. It's positive day, like to hear all.
Yeah, it's good. It's
Yeah,
called old school, but I love a book.
me too.
I can't. I have e-read before, but
Hmm.
it's nothing compared to a book.
Right. I mean, sometimes I just need to like if waste some time and I can't pop out a book, so I'll just
Sure.
write, you know. Okay, so on to the Blackstone Ritual itself. So there is a lot of action adventure in the Blackstone Ritual, like we mentioned earlier, which I love as a reader. So as an author, what are your favorite types of scenes that you like to write? Like as we were writing this, what were your favorite scenes to write?
Oh man, I
Can you pick? Like, are
I
they all your
I
babies?
I know, no. For me, my favorite scenes to write are scenes with banter.
Hmm.
I love those, and
Yeah.
I love creature features.
Yeah.
So I love bringing in like a monster or a villain or something like that. Anything that's where the main character or whoever I'm writing about is having to face off with like a, you know, like a fight or something like that. I
Right.
love them. I love creature features, and I think Tales of the Barnwood would not be complete without them. It's a, you know, it's a book about a hidden world full of magical creatures
Hmm.
and magical forest. I can't have it without a few creature features in
Right.
there.
Right.
And so it just kind of, and they make good obstacles, especially in fantasy, when you're like, man, I need to, you know, I've got this character traveling from point A to point B, but I need to slow them down somehow. Dragon.
Right.
You
Give me a
know?
monster. Like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
exactly.
And of
So
course, and as a reader, we're like, yay, like, you know, like it's
yay!
exciting. Like, oh, you know, it's fun.
Exactly.
So I get
Yeah.
it. Okay.
It's one of the, I think that's probably one of the main reasons I like fantasy, because if you have a plot hole, just put a dragon in it.
Yeah. You know, like who knows what's gonna happen? Like, you know you're gonna get here. You know you have like three main things you want to happen. Well, that's not gonna
Right.
make a book. I need
Yeah.
at least seven monsters to like
Exactly.
I get it.
You get it.
I get it. I get it. I feel like a lot of people would get it. That's fun.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier Evil Queens.
Mhm.
I want to talk about Queen. How do you say it? Leonora? Lenora?
Leonora. Hmm.
Leonora. Okay. Because I know sometimes authors have a certain way how they want it to be said, and
Hmm.
then I don't say it that way. So I
I,
wanted to make sure.
I really
um,
went into naming my characters to kind of be phonetically
right. Because
simple.
some, yeah. Hmm.
Like I don't want people to like get confused too much, but I feel like most of them are, it's how they look is how they sound.
Right. Okay. Good to know. Because one of my favorite series that I've read, I was taught, I try to get other people to read this so I can like fangirl about it. And so I read the books and another coworker listened to the audio and we were trying to talk about the books and we had no idea what each other was talking about because they were said
Different
like
names.
so differently. It was
Right.
really funny. So okay, back to Queen Leonora. The Hound Queen.
Hmm.
So I love an evil queen archetype. I
Same.
love it. They're my favorite. I even have like I used to work with teens a bunch.
Mhm.
So I would always pretend that I was like the evil librarian and I would be like, I'm a dark queen with a dark crown and like don't mess with me because I have like a dark soul and dark powers. Like it was just a funny thing that we would just like make up. So anyways, I can appreciate a dark queen. But what I want to know is who is your favorite character and what drew you to them?
My favorite character
In the Blackstone
in
Ritual.
the Blackstone Ritual.
Yes.
Leonora's up there. She is up there. I like you said, I
I,
love a good evil queen,
yes.
and I love a good powerful woman with no inhibitions.
Yeah. And with
So
like a dog, large wolf.
I know, right? Yeah, which
Yeah.
was the perfect touch. You know,
Yes.
it ended up
Yes.
being a crucial plot point, but I didn't intend for it to be at the beginning. It's so funny. So I often use my wife to bounce ideas off of. Like
Hmm.
I'll just say something to her and see what she says and just kind of like, does this sound okay? Does this sound okay?
Right.
And during the plotting of it, I had Queen Leonora. I, you know, made her beautiful, made her awesome, made her cool. But I was like, what do I do to separate her from other evil queens? I don't want her
Right.
to just be the evil queen. Like what's going to separate her? What's going to make her, you know, unique? So I walked into the living room from my office to my wife who was sitting like watching TV or something. And I was like, okay, hear me out. I need to make this evil queen, like she needs to be different. What can I do to make her and then I just looked at her and our dog Pippin, who is like a rat, basically, was like draped across her lap, and he had his like paws like crossed, and
So
he was kind of looking
regal.
at me. Yeah, looking all regal, and I was like,
Vibes.
there, never mind. She was like, okay.
That's amazing. That's
So yeah,
amazing. That's
they made
hilarious.
an official plot point. But my favorite character, I think, she's withstood the test of time at this point, is Kella.
Hmm.
You meet very little of her in the Blackstone Ritual, but she explodes in book 2,
Okay.
which I did on purpose. I didn't want to make this character who plays such a crucial role in the story not show up in the first book. So her role is very small, and she is separated from Ard.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a dual point of view type thing.
Right.
Even though the book is told in third person, I can really kind of talk from any standpoint.
Hmm.
But she's my favorite for
Yeah,
sure.
I liked her, and I wondered if we were going to see more of her. I was like, there's something about you. So
Yeah.
I wondered. So that's a good.
Okay, so you finished the book then.
Yes,
Oh,
I
right.
like read it like sitting at my desk. I was like, this is research. So I was like,
That's good. So now I don't
yeah,
have to worry about too many spoilers if I give anything too much away.
yeah, yeah. So I liked her, and I was like, there's more to her.
Yeah.
So okay,
She's
good.
very, yeah, she was inspired by all of my love for strong female
Mm.
characters. She's headstrong. She's lawful good. She's got a bow and arrow. I mean, come on.
Hello. Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
So
I know. I feel like we're kindred spirits because everything you're saying, I'm vibing with, and I'm like, yes, like I get it. So I
I'm
love it.
a fan first, and an author second. I always say that. It's my mantra. It's my thing.
Mhm.
I truly believe that if you want to be a good storyteller, or if you to be a good creator in general, is to love stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wouldn't have written this book if not for countless other stories and narratives and things that I had consumed
Mhm.
throughout my whole life. So I'm a fan first and an author second.
Right.
And I try to embody that as much as I can and not forget
Yeah.
where I
And
come
all
from.
of those have influenced you and shaped you as a person, much
Right.
less an author. So
Right. Yeah. You get it.
I get it. I get it. I feel like a lot of people would get it. Like people I talk to on the daily basis, and we could just fangirl about books and stuff. I mean, people understand, readers understand. So it's
Yeah.
good to see that like it can translate on the author side of it on the back end.
Right.
So that's really cool. Okay, so I have to know, you did mention Kella, but I have to know, what can you hint at what's in store for Ard and some of the other characters in future books in the series?
Hmm.
I mean, obviously you can't give spoilers, but like
Right.
obviously there's another book coming. You've mentioned it. So
Yes,
like,
there is. There's one currently being revised right now.
wow, okay.
It's been a very tough time drafting this novel. Not only is it my second book, and I have this kind of like, there's it's a kind of like a known thing in the writer community that your second book is always tough.
Mhm.
Because the first one you're writing whenever you want to, and there's no deadlines, and and you're full of wonder and full of hope, and then your second one,
You have
your second
reality.
one,
It's
exactly. It's a little bit of a challenge, and also I've been plotting it all throughout 2020, which has been
a year.
yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
But it is currently being revised. I think everyone will be very surprised to see where Ard goes, because Ard starts out this very savvy and witty stable boy who's just kind of like above it all in his little village and thinks he's kind of, he walks around with his chest held high, and he just gets broken down and broken down and broken down throughout at least the first book. And then the second book, it's no different. And in the second book, but I do think in the second book, people will realize that Ard is, though the story centers around him, there is so much more than just him and his struggles. There is so much more. And there's, what I'm really most excited about is to introduce these other characters who have been sitting in my brain, and they've been just hanging out backstage waiting.
Their time is coming to shine.
Yes, and they're finally here. So I was finally able to dip into these characters that I've always wanted to. And they were here from the get-go. You know, they're not new. They were part of this storyline. They just weren't part of the storyline
The
in book
beginning,
one.
right.
So, I mean, now I'm writing these characters and it's just fantastic. I've cried more writing this second book
Oh wow.
than I did. I didn't even cry writing the first one. There was moments where there was moments when like the audiobook, which is also coming out.
Yes.
Blackstone
Okay.
Ritual. Yes, there was moments where I was having it read back to me because like the reader, my publisher sends me the recordings just to kind of make sure that, you know, they're saying everything right or whatever it is. And there was moments I cried during that because I was like hearing it read back to me. I'm like,
yeah,
I wrote this. You know? And there was moments where I was listening to it that I forgot that I was that it was me, it was my words. I was like, man, that's how you know, I guess. Because I was sitting there going, I was like, man, this is good. I was like, wait a minute.
I am good.
I'm good.
Yes,
This is, you know, I did this, you know? So there's moments I cried there, but I cried more. I cried actually drafting book 2, which is, it's a lot.
A roller coaster.
Yeah, roller coaster emotionally. But there's a lot. I think people will be very happy to see, one, be introduced to new characters. One, get more of Kella. So much more happens to Kella in book 2. And to see where Ard is lining up. Because book 2 is the rocket ship that rockets into the finale. So a lot's going on.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I'm a book crier. I cry I cry in things that I shouldn't cry at. You know, like they break up, they're obviously going to get back together, but I am crying. So it's good to hear that because I like to cry. I want to be destroyed by a book. So
I hope I can make you cry. I do love.
Trust me, it doesn't take much to cry.
I do very much love being moved by stories and stuff. So I try to emulate that as much as possible. Sometimes I tell my wife, I'm like, I want this scene to really, really hit, you know, like I want it to really drive home. And she's like, and she'll read things sometimes. And then because she's emotionally attached to all these characters too. And she knows what's happening to them because I'm bouncing ideas off of her. So sometimes those ideas will change or whatever she goes. And like whenever something changes negatively, she's like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this to me? Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, you know, explain X, Y, Z, like why I have to do this or why this person has to disappear or whatever it is. And she's like, God, I hate this so much.
Gonna keep reading. That's the sign of a good one. Yeah, because I'm also, even though I do like cry and I like to cry, I want a happy ending. So I feel like there's some people who are fine with devastation in that, and then there's some people who are just like, no, I want everyone to be happy and get what they deserve.
Yeah, I think for me, I like when endings are happily unexpected.
That's a good one.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Like I don't like, you know, not that I don't like a cliche happy ending. I mean, it's always nice when the hero survives and the, you know, evil is vanquished and, you know, they get the girl or get the guy or get the whoever they're ending up with. And I think those are good things to have. I think tropes work and I think they're popular for a reason. But I always like when something doesn't go the way that I'm anticipating it to, but it's still a happy ending.
Right, because that's what makes you remember it, and that's what makes it you really attach to it. I agree.
For instance, at the end of the Hunger Games, when, you know, Katniss ends up with Peeta, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, of course she did. Like, it would have been more surprising if Katniss was like, I don't want anyone, and then I'm just going to live my lonely life out.
Right.
Although
then, I'm still burnt up about the whole Finnick situation in Mockingjay.
Why?
That hit me hard.
Yeah. Not fair.
Yeah.
Not fair. Cruel.
Cruel and unusual.
Yeah.
So, yes. Yeah, I get that.
I feel like I honestly, though, where my book is going, I feel like I might get called cruel too.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. I have said, you know, countless books that I have read. I'm like, why? Why would you do this? Why? It's like, you know, I read the next one. I read and then after a while, I'm like, that was my favorite book. Like, this was great. So, I mean, it's a give and a take. And also with readers, with fans, you're not going to be able to please every single person on every single
Sure.
thing. So, but it's up to you as an author to, do your thing, be true to you, tell the story that you want to tell,
Right.
and hope that we connect with it. So,
That's it. That's all we
yeah.
got to do.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you said that, you have these other characters coming in and these other, you have more stories to tell. And I think that can say a lot for your series titled Tales of the Bardenwood, as
Right.
opposed, it's not Art of the Bardenwood, it's
Yeah,
Tales of the
exactly.
Bardenwood. But so I'm
Exactly.
excited to see some of these other characters and other journeys that we have
Yeah. There
coming up.
is there is a lot.
Okay,
There's a
good.
lot.
I'm excited. Okay, so you mentioned like your future book, but do you know maybe like how many books ideas do you have for this series? Do you have any other future works in progress? Maybe not in this series, but other series? Like, can you?
I definitely do. I'm constantly putting ideas down, and I try not to delve too deeply into them because I can get distracted.
Easily, yeah.
And my wife is always like, "Dot, finish this book. Like, you're working on this one, finish that one first. Don't start." And I refuse to start more than one project. I think authors who can do that are they have to be full-time authors. I can't imagine anyone being a part-time author and getting that done, but they amaze me as well. The ones who can who can be in multiple, hop into multiple POVs and do multiple.
Different worlds and keep it completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. That's very difficult for me to do. So I refuse to start a story, like start a draft while I'm working on another draft, but I will plot other things. So the Bardenwood is slated for a trilogy. It was initially slated to be a 4-part series, but I have decided to crush it down into 3. And I decided that midway through 2020 while drafting the second novel. So I had to like let my publisher know, and we talked it out. We decided that a trilogy was probably best. Just because we were deciding, we were talking about launching the Blackstone Ritual,
Mm-hmm.
and it got pushed back. My book was supposed to come out in May. Then it was
Oh,
supposed to come
wow.
out in July. Then we were like, by the time September came around, we were like, you know what? It just has to go out.
Mm-hmm.
We can't hold it off until 2021. Like, there's other books in line at the publisher. Like,
Right.
we can't halt it. So we're just going to have to rock it through, launch it out, and do the best we can. And it's been fantastic. It's had a very good run. And there's more to come. And it is a series. So there's, the prospect of getting more books and stuff like that.
Right,
So we crushed it down into 3. And I'm now drafting that. But yes, I do have another very, 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 very enticing idea for my next novel, which will be a standalone, but will have the opportunity
to grow.
to be more.
Gotcha.
The Bardenwood is going to probably, I can't. The Bardenwood is large enough. The world is large enough for me to do other stories in, but I'm not in a place, I guess, mentally or creatively to kind of dive back into
Right.
that world. Maybe, who knows? But
maybe one day, yeah, leave it open. Tales of the Bardenwood.
Right.
It could have multiple.
Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
Who knows? But right now it is 3. Right now
Gotcha.
it's 3. And
Okay.
the lore in Tales of the Bardenwood, I think, is large enough for it to possibly be something else, but not yet.
Yeah. Well, I love a good trilogy. I think 3 is a good number. I'm excited that we get more. We get to see more. And I'm excited about this, other series or other standalone that you intrigued me on. So
it's very good. It's a very good idea, and I think it's captured me like the Bardenwood has. So it gives me no rest. Like, I have dreams about it all the time.
That's the best kind of
about it. Constantly going back into the plot and adding things and adding more stuff. And this one centers around a character the idea is a contemporary YA fantasy, a urban fantasy based in Louisiana. Yes, I'm
fun.
very excited. I'm very, very excited.
And that's great because you don't get a lot of Louisiana, especially like YA fantasy, paranormal, or urban fantasy. You don't get a lot of that.
You don't.
I
can't think of. I always do a ton of research when I'm plotting, and I could not find one noteworthy YA contemporary or YA fantasy at all any
Mm-hmm.
fantasy based in Louisiana. There are some that like every now and then like a historical fantasy will like touch on like New
Right.
Orleans, but it's like cliche, like it's the
Yeah.
you
I feel like
know
people can set things just in New Orleans because it's a city that you can, you
exactly,
know.
and it's a cultural hub and everything. But
Mhm.
me growing up in the New Orleans area and the Baton Rouge area, I have like really good insight in there, and I just have a lot of hope for this series. So,
Well,
but
that's fun.
that's way off.
Obviously, but hey, you heard it first here.
You heard it here
So
first.
yes, so that's good to know. So, okay, so one last question. I do want to know if you have any just words of wisdom for aspiring writers to give them. Just one last little thing that maybe has helped you kind of keep going. Um, you know,
Yeah. Oh man.
which is a very broad thing for me to say,
Sure.
like a
Yeah.
request of you.
My best advice. Well, I'll say this. I'll give you my best advice and the best advice I've ever received. And the best advice I received was, and it kind of sounds negative at first, but you will never write something that is wholly original. And and you following that up. So write your story. I constantly talk about how when you go into a library or you go into a bookstore, there are hundreds of stories, hundreds of them, and more on the way. And each of them are written by a different person. There's no reason that your story has no place on
Mhm.
there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the idea that you will never write something that is wholly original, because I think a lot of writers, I mean myself included, hold back their stories because they're like, it's not.
It's been there. I've done. I've seen that. I
It's been
read
there,
that.
but it's too tropey, or it's too, it's been there, done that. Story has been told before. Tell it. Like get it out there. There is a publisher, there is an agent that will take that story. If we can have periods of young adult fantasy where there are a billion vampire stories and a billion fae stories or a billion whatever it is, whatever the story is at the time, if we can have a world where that exists, you can have a world where your story exists, and that just, so for me, that was one of the best things I ever heard. Someone was like, you're not going to write something that is wholly original. Like there are parts in the Blackstone Ritual that are not just like wholly unique. Like, like the journey, the hero's journey, that's
Been around
been
for
around
yeah.
forever. That's been around since the Odyssey and the Iliad, like
Mhm.
that's never going to go away. That's, there are tropes in the Bardenwood. It's full with, people will say that there's cliches in it, but that's what makes up the story. And it's what we love about stories. So write yours.
Right.
And that brings me to my second piece of advice, which is write.
You're speaking to me.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. Right. You have to write. Carve out time. You have to write. You have to write all of the time. You have to draft all of the time, plot all of the time. You got to write. Get it out. It's just even if you end up getting rid of whatever you write, write. And I think a lot of people forget that. They get an
Mhm.
idea and then they start to write that idea and then they get bored or distracted with life and they never come back to it, or they're like, oh, this idea is not wholly original, so I'm just going to leave it alone, or whatever it is. But write it. You got to write. You got to carve out time. You do whatever you have to do, and get that manuscript done. Because if I can do it, anyone can do it.
I love that you said that, because both of those things are the things that have been like hindering me. And
Mhm.
I've heard from other people, and it's just, in a world of, the shelves, like you said, are just full of books. And like, I've read this before, if I find something cool, even just like a working title in my head of this is what I'm calling all of this stuff that I'm writing, it sounds so much like this book or this book or this book. But you know what? You just
It's always going to be that way.
right.
It's always going to be that way.
Yeah. And then all of those books that I've read have touched me. They may have been very similar, but they've all meant something to me and
Sure.
most likely other people. So that's
Yep.
great. That's
And
great words of wisdom.
good. There you go, Danielle. You got to
I
get out. You
appreciate
got to write
that.
the book.
I appreciate that. I hope other people appreciate that as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Swear. I had a good time. I'm speaking for all the people that are probably watching this right now, but we're so excited that we get to talk to you. We're so excited that we get to put the Blackstone Ritual on our shelves and hopefully books in the future. So any of you that are watching this and are excited about what you're hearing and want to read some of his books, you can come to the library. I believe, did you do your book signing at Cavalier House?
I did.
And yeah, so we actually went there the other day and I saw your books there. So yeah, and it's great to see a local author doing his thing, thriving. And yeah, this has been awesome. And we thank you for coming and talking to us. And hopefully we could talk to you again in the future.
Yes, thank you so
Awesome.
much, Danielle, for having me. I mean, this is all I've ever wanted, was to give back to the community that I came from in creative ways. And if I can tell my story, and if it can be told to the people that matter most to me, which is the people that I grew up around and the community that I grew up around, that's all I really want.
That's
And
awesome.
I love everyone. I love everyone that came out to my signing. I love everyone that patronizes the Denham Springs Library and Cavalier House of Books. And I mean, it's something that really gives me a lot of joy. So I really, really appreciate you guys having me. It's been a true pleasure.
Yes, we're so glad to have you come on here, and it was a lot of fun in this time, this crazy world we're
Yep.
living in right now. And it's good to connect. It's good to connect.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. Hopefully we'll hear from you again in the future. And if you guys liked this video, stay tuned. We'll have much more. And until next time, happy reading, friends.
Happy reading.